All right. Singer Gino Vannelli is here to talk about his amazing career and to share some of what's going on for him right now. He will be doing so with Jazz's publisher, Michael Fagan. I'm Brian Zimmerman, and I just want to stop and welcome you to the Jazz's Happy Hour. All right. So, yeah, before we get into today's programming, let me just recommend another ECM album that I think you're really going to like. It is by accordionist Jean-Louis Martinier and guitarist Kevin Siddiqui. It's called Rivage. It's a really nice duo album. It has that kind of left bank, rive gauche, chanson feel. Pour yourself a glass of wine. Go sit out on the patio in the afternoon with a nice book or some good company. Yeah, it's exactly the soundtrack for that. To learn more about this album and all the other ECM stuff, check out ecmrecords.com. Want to also let you know about Blue Sound, an award-winning wireless high-res sound system that lets you play music in any and every room throughout your home. It's one of those systems where you can kind of sync your music from your phone with the speakers, then bounce it from the kitchen to the living room to the bedroom. Blue Sound products are audiophile-grade systems, and that's what every jazz fan deserves. So you can learn more at bluesound.com or by checking out our website, jazziz.com, where we have put together a Blue Sound buyer's guide. Let me also remind you that our summer 2020 issue is available right now, and I mean right now. Here it is. It is the summer issue all about fusion. Great cover story on Chick Corea as well. We talked to some other young fusion players who are keeping the fusion flame alive. We got a essential fusion discography in there. It is awesome. We've also put all of the articles from that issue onto our website as HTML web articles. You can read them now. You will need a subscription, but fear not. We are offering a special subscription offer to Jazz's Happy Hour viewers for just 99 cents per month for 3 months. You will receive unlimited digital access, which means you could read every story that appears in that print magazine. Plus, we'll enroll you to receive our next print issue, which is coming out in the fall and is all about the art of the album, collecting albums, listening to albums, album art, producing albums. It's really great. And yeah, you enroll now, you get all the web content plus complimentary print issue come fall. Well, all right. It is Thursday, May 28th, and I don't want to take up too much time in this intro because, like I said, our guest is Gino Vannelli. Yeah, he has been bridging the worlds of jazz and rock for a long time now. You know his hits. I Just Want to Stop, Living Inside Myself, Wild Horses. He's going to be on the show in a minute, and he'll be talking with his longtime friend, Jazz's publisher, Michael Fagan, who, hey, look, just so happened to walk into the joint. Michael, are you there?
I am here. Hello, Brian.
Hey, man. Fancy running into you in a place like this.
Yes.
You come here often.
I do. I'm here a lot.
That's right, man. Well, hey, before we bring Gino in, I just want to know, how long have you known him?
You know, it was back in the 90s. I mean, I've been a fan of Gino's for decades. I mean, literally from his early albums on A&M. But in the 90s, when I started my record company, I started having conversations with Gino. He was actually introduced to me personally through Jimmy Haslip, who played on Brother Brother.
Right.
And then we had some really great conversations over the years. We'll talk about it with Gino. When I opened Jazz's Nightlife in Boca Raton, we're like, who do we want as our grand opening? I said, I got to get Gino Vannelli.
Right on, man. Well, look who else just so happened to walk into the joint. The one and only Gino Vannelli. Gino, are you there, man?
See you guys.
Hey, yes, I'm here. Welcome, welcome, and thank you for being part of the Jazz's Happy Hour. We'd like to do a toast each morning. This one's to you, man, and to you, Michael.
To you,
okay.
Gino.
Conversation.
All right, I got one here too.
All right. Well, I will let you two do your thing, and I'm going to go schmooze with the bartender. So have a great
talk amongst yourself.
I'm getting a little verklempt. Talk amongst yourselves. Exactly.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
So
so long, guys.
Hi, Gino.
Hey, Michael. Long time
Great to see you. Yeah, absolutely. It's been too long. You know, speaking about fusion, I've always considered you the ultimate fusion artist. I was introduced to fusion through Return to Forever and bands like that. But when then I heard your music, I said, now here's someone who fuses almost every music I love. How did you come from a boy in Montreal who played the drums to essentially move into almost every genre that was related to jazz, pop, classical, symphonic, almost opera. How did that come about? Where did you get that epiphany?
Well, first of all, it started when we were all very young. My dad was very much into many eclectic kinds of music, including jazz, big band, opera, all the things, Latin music. And he really introduced us to a lot of sophisticated music when I was a very, very young boy. 5 or 6, I knew who Coltrane and Miles Davis and Sonny Rollins were, and all the big bands, Artie Shaw and those guys, Stan Kenton. And I was lucky enough to be a drummer in a relief band in a club called the Casa Loma in Montreal. In that relief band, we'd get in like Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and Stan Kenton to play, and Duke Ellington and people like that. And I got to see those guys live, and there was no better experience than seeing that live. And that was my high watermark. So that was, to me, what music was. It's almost like saying in 1955, if you didn't play Steinway D, you weren't playing a real piano. So for me, that was what music should be, and I tried to incorporate that. The one caveat for me, compared to most instrumentalists that were using fusion, is that I was really, really inclined to want to be a songwriter. So going back further still to, Rodgers and Hammerstein and Cole Porter and Sammy Kahn and Johnny Mercer and Jerome Kern and Ira Gershwin, George Gershwin. I mean, those are really the icons and the examples, the models that I wanted to base my skills after. So trying to mix all those styles into one became almost a life quest. And it was difficult because I was really not very good at any of them, but I had the concept in my head, and I kept trying to fuse them. And I had my Cole Porter book of lyrics with me, always looking at, well, what would he do? What would he do? And so on and so forth. And so finally, with the years, I started getting better at it. But that's really the real, practical reason why I was into it. I was exposed to it. When we were kids, we went to see the Montreal Symphony every other Thursday, or I think Thursday of the month. Our school went to see the Montreal Symphony rehearse. The first time I heard Daphne and Chloe, or Arabesque, or Claire de Lune by Debussy, I just said, I think I just, perished and, went to heaven. Because that kind of music, French Impressionism, I felt that a lot of jazz roots came from French Impressionism. And surely enough, it did. So Ravel and Debussy and Fauré, and some of the other composers too, but those were the three that I really, really studied and listened to days on end, trying to understand how they moved without exposing their tonics, and how they moved from harmony to harmony, and taking the melody line from the last chord that was played and maybe the third of that chord, starting a new melody with that. And they just learn how to modulate in ways that was uniquely their own. And I really based a lot of my music off of that too.
Well, I was into the Beatles back in when they were releasing albums. I then moved to progressive rock after they quit. And then when I was introduced to jazz fusion, it was brother to brother for me that brought me into your world. I, of course, went back and listened to all your previous albums on A&M. And then I was fortunate enough to see you perform Brother to Brother, that tour in Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
And what happened that night, I could say it actually changed my life, certainly from a music listener, and possibly even planted the seed to do what I'm doing today. And that is, I saw a performer on stage who had truly a wonderful voice. I knew that you wrote the music. I knew that you were up there being the consummate performer. I saw you being a conductor, an arranger. I saw all that happening on one stage. And I said, my God, this musician, this artist has it all. Can sometimes that blessing also be a curse?
Well, the only thing, Michael, that's a curse about it is that, you're you're constantly on, and you're constantly want to create, and you constantly, when leaves rustle in a tree, I hear tonality in it, and I want to write about it. I want to write about what I feel constantly. I never stop writing. I just finished another 3 songs in the last maybe month that I'm going to get in the studio and record in July. Um, and the curse is that it never goes away, and that you know you you're late and you're delayed and you don't answer your wife properly, and that your head's in the clouds, somewhere, some would say somewhere else. But and the blessing is that you constantly measure where you're at, and I could listen to Brother and understand that's where I was at and that's how I felt. And I could listen to the last record and understand that I didn't choose fusion as much as I chose, Americana with poetry and some jazz maybe, and some other maybe contemporary songwriting form. But I could really measure where I'm at, almost as if I'm looking at pictures of myself from 6 years old, to now, and you could see, yourself, you gradually either evolve or decline,
Right, right.
But that's the good part about it, that you do have a body of work that you could look upon.
Yeah, and the one of the thing, look, I've in addition to listening to everything you've ever done, I've don't be weirded out by this, but I've studied you, and I've studied your audience, and the thing that I've noticed is, sort of, to use the cliche, to know Gino Vannelli is to love Gino Vannelli. And what I mean by that is that your fans aren't just casual fans. They're all in. Yeah. They can't wait to see you wherever you're playing. I remember when you performed twice at my club, people came from the 10,000 miles away to see you, and they were passionate and wanted to meet you, and they brought their LPs and CDs and they wanted them signed. And then the other thing happens. There's, obviously we all want greater base of people that see the kind of work that we do. But then when you're introduced, like what we did is we invited a lot of people to the grand opening that you performed at, which we'll get at in a minute, because that was a funny day, that never heard Gino Vannelli. But I know that they left that show saying, I just witnessed something. I am so glad I came tonight. I'm going to go buy Gino Vannelli music because I was just introduced to a music that I'd never heard before. I didn't know that it could come out of one musical genius. And I don't say that lightly. I don't call a lot of people musical geniuses, but I think it's the way that you've worked so hard and have continually improved over the years, and your fans follow you.
Tricia just asked me a question, my wife, when did you write None So Beautiful as the Brave? And she thought I wrote it, right after 9/11. And I said, no, I actually wrote it in 1989. And she asked me, why did you write it? There was no wars going on. It really, were there any heroes to speak of? Was there anything that drew you to, an understanding of what happens to military guys when they come back, and so on and so forth? And this is what we can talk about, the blessing and the curse. One day I just started reading up on the Civil War and some of the shell-shocked people from World War I, and some of the people that came back from World War II, not knowing what they had. That was a form of PTSD. No one called it by that name. They just call it war fatigue or battle fatigue, which is another euphemism. And I just thought that writing None So Beautiful felt like it needed to be written, and I just tucked it away. And I never, I didn't record it till 7 years later on the Yonder Tree album, and then re-recorded it the way I really wanted to record it with an orchestra, the Metropolitan Orchestra here up in Portland, and made a video for a fallen hero who was part of the team that was gone to save, I think it was Marcus Luttrell and those guys up in Afghanistan. And he was from our area here in Oregon. So I decided I was going to redo it and dedicate it to him. So for me, what you're talking about is I guess you can't write unless you're feeling it in your bones, you're feeling it in your heart, in your chest. So that curses that you're constantly feeling and you constantly want to share, but you realize, lest you repeat yourself musically, you need to keep studying. So in the last few days, I've been studying a lot, listening to a lot of Brad Maldau's new stuff and what he's trying to approach, how he's approaching his fusion, playing some synths and this and that, getting a little more modern, really coming out of the bop era, you know, and really using things that are a lot kind of cooler for today, and constantly doing that, and listening to Martin Kaler's, you know, playing. He's just a phenomenal guitar player.
Sure.
And so is Tommy Emmanuel, you know, and so listen to them constantly, YouTubing them and all, looking at their fingering, their harmonies, and how Tommy really employs jazz with Americana is really something fantastic. Making sure if you play any guitar, you understand keeping the strings open and singing and ringing is the aim of the acoustic guitar. And how do you do that with some of the really complex polychords in jazz? And he's managed to really master a lot of that. So it's the constant feeling and the constant searching, the constant listening. I'm going to be doing some concerts with I don't know if you know Jacob Carlson from Sweden.
No. Oh, yes, I do. Yes.
He's a wonderful piano player. He's really in the style of Keith Jarrett. I mean, he really had that same kind of weaving style and that hesitant melodic style that keeps you in space, keeps you in mystery. And so we're planning to do some concerts in 2022 now that everything's been backed up to 2021. And everybody, and you know, in my camp says, are you sure you want to do that? You know, because you know, people don't know you just going out with a piano player. But I tell people that, you know, on our art team, it's important for me to do that because I discover new things about myself, let alone Jacob himself, piano player, but how a singer and a piano player could create actually a 90-minute show.
Yeah.
And what you got to do to not only entertain the audience, but really please yourself, piano player and singer, and how it's fun to do and how you make it work. And lo and behold, you just get better at being yourself when you put yourself in slightly uncomfortable situations.
And I've noticed you do that a lot in your live shows. I wouldn't say there are easier Gino Vannelli songs, but you tend to tackle the difficult ones that, you know, I think someone who really knows your music, there's like, I wonder how he's going to do this live. And do you do that on purpose? Do you take the more difficult compositions?
Well, I take the compositions that I think were universally my best at the time, because every era has this sort of push button kind of songs that, you know, were good for the time, but some, you know, survive the test of time, and I want to redo those. I want to put them on stage with the band, and I always come up with some kind of new twist to the arrangement while keeping most of the intention of the original arrangement. I just rearranged The River Must Flow, Keep On Walking, and The Rhythm of Romance for our upcoming shows in Europe, which I think are going to be pushed to 2021. But they're a hell of a lot of fun. It's a hell of a lot of fun to go back and to sing Coke Machines on the Ho Chi Minh Trail with some, you know, really more intricate groove and giving some really cool parts to the horn players. And it's a big kick, you know, Michael, to do that, you know, and there's really in the end, there's really no other reason to be touring at my age, other than I think I can do it well, and I have a lot of fun doing it, and the band just kicks.
Wow. So I'm going to take you back. I know you're asked this a lot, but I'll segue it from a conversation I had with Herb Albert.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Herb, and I said, you know, Herb, there was an artist that you signed years ago that truly should have been one of the world's best known, spectacular pop rock stars in the world. He said, let me stop you, Gino Vannelli. I mean, I didn't even have to say your name. Of all the greats that Herb signed, he knew what I was talking about. Can you tell our viewers how that all happened? It's a fantastic story. I can't hear it enough.
Well, you know, I was always inclined toward the mystery. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my mother told me it was time to start going to church. I was born nominally as a Roman Catholic, but nobody really practiced it very much. You know, yeah, my mom, yeah, she just passed from COVID.
Yeah,
So
if I could
mom,
stop you for a second,
yes,
I just wanted to say, Gino, that I wanted to show that photo. Our condolences, the Jazziz team, our viewers, for your loss. And Gino, we just want to tell you, we send our prayers and we're here with you.
thank you so much, Michael. You know, today's her birthday.
Oh,
So
happy birthday.
she passed just 2-3 weeks ago, and I'll just say a word about that. You know, she
Sure,
passed
please.
without pain. COVID took her within 9 hours. It just went boom, boom, and she was in a coma, and she just slipped away. And in a way, she was, you know, delivered from the punishment of what that terrible virus can be. And so, because her immune system was such at 90, almost 93 years old, she just passed very quickly. So in that sense, I'm very, very, very grateful that she did. On the other hand, I'm still pissed for all the dishonesty that's gone on, and this shouldn't have happened, ought not to have happened, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. But
Yeah.
let that alone. Now the good part. The good part is that my mother said it's time for you to go to church. And I said, yes, but
Okay.
you and Dad don't go to church. I said, well, she says, yeah, but don't do as I do, do as I say. So I really reluctantly went to church. I was not almost 6 years old, and I was wondering what it was going to be like, because I knew it was going to be in Latin and so on and so forth. Well, let me tell you, Michael, when I got in to the church, and 100-piece choir was singing Panis Angelicus and some other hymns with the pipe organ. Really, I said, this was a very spiritual experience for me, to be in church, because nothing sounded like 100 voices singing those hymns with a pipe organ and those harmonies from those Gregorian chants.
Mm-hmm.
And it struck me very deeply that if I could be moved by something like that, I kept a very, very close association with those parts of me. So that day in Los Angeles, 1972, I had been trying. I lived in New York for a year and a half and came close, but I moved to Los Angeles for 4 months, knocked on every record company door, and nobody wanted to know anything. And our money ran out, and we had to leave Los Angeles. And that morning, I stopped into a church. It was 5:30 in the morning. And I said, I need to think about this. I cannot leave without something happening. So I went into the church and I fell asleep basically for 4 or 5 hours, and woke up about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and went back to the motel where Joe and I were staying. And Joe was still asleep, and I took the sock out of his mouth that I left there the night before. And I said, Joe, we're going somewhere, so wake up and put anything on. So we skedaddled out of the Orange Motel, it was called. It was $5 a day. And yeah. And so I grabbed my guitar. We parked ourselves in front of the gates of A&M on La Brea. And of course, the guard came down and said that, you know, I shouldn't wait here. And I retorted by saying it was public property. And 3 hours later, I saw Herb come out of his office through the gates and walk across the parking lot. I dropped my guitar and I just ran through, and the guard, you know, cursed and knew that was going to happen. And he followed me. Of course, he was a Vietnam vet and had a limp. And by the time I got to Herb, Herb was shocked. And then Johnny grabbed my arm and starts hauling me off. And I gave Herb one last look, and Herb, just something in him just said, wait a minute, Johnny. And he beckoned me to come over, and he said, what do you want? I said, you got to listen to me. You know, listen to some of the songs I've written. And he just paused. And I thought he was going to say, well, either yes, or get out of here and never show your face here again. And he wrote me a little pass. He said, come back in 30 minutes. And of course, the guard grumbled because, you know, he lost his authority totally. But later we became good friends, Johnny and I. And So I came back and with my guitar and I played him Crazy Life, Powerful People, Mama Coco, you know, Lady, a bunch of songs, you know, from the first two albums. And he had his head down, you know, just laying down on the desk. And he just picked up his head and said, just welcome to the family. And so I recorded 7 records, you know, for A&M Records.
And what I recall from those days is you were putting out at least 1 album a year. You in succession.
Yeah.
There was a lot of recording output at that point. And then after that, you kind of pivoted. Some life-changing event.
Yes, because I signed with Arista Records at the time, Clive Davis, and our first album was successful, the Nightwalker album. Living Inside Myself is top 10 single on Billboard. And then I decided to do something different musically. And we had a clash, you know, of, it was really, we were at loggerheads with what I should be doing. And then it was a question of having a vision, and yet I always had an open mind. Well, maybe he should influence me a little bit more. And then I would hear some of the songs he wanted me to do, Air Supply songs. I said, well, you know, I can't do that. And so I started losing faith in him, and I started losing that trust that I thought I had. And he started losing his buzz for me. And then while I was on A&M, on Arista, I recorded the Black Cars record. I knew it was a good record. I knew it could be a big record worldwide. And he didn't want to release it. At that point, it got really personal. While a lot of other record companies wanted to release it, but he wouldn't let me go. So this is where we got into it. That's why you didn't hear from me for a while.
So he blackballed you.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. You know, It's kind of a dirty word, but that's what happened. And we couldn't go anywhere. That's why it was released first in Europe, because the Europeans didn't care what he thought, what he said. So I finally got out of that contract 3 or 4 years later, which was really a terrible period for me. And then I started working my way up. But then by that moment in time, which a lot of artists, whether it be, you know, George Michael or a few other artists that, you know, rest his soul, that found out that when you kind of go, you know, have a conflict with a big company, namely a record company, especially in those days, you're going to lose, because they have time and other artists on their side, and you have just yourself and not much time. Mm-hmm. So after 4 or 5 years, I found suddenly my career lost momentum. And but then new things happened. Black Cars was actually a big record for me worldwide. We started making videos. But, you know, Michael, by that time, by the 80s, I started feeling differently about wanting to be a pop artist. You know, I kind of liked mixing fusion for pop and all that. But by 1986, 87, the market really had changed, and people in the 70s were experimenting with fusion. And the 80s, it started changing. People really were going for the buck instead of actually kind of committed to the music. I'm sure you knew that, and you felt that yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think I came home one day, and they told me that I was listening to the radio, and I think it said the Michael Jackson album had hit like 5 times diamond, and it was like 50 million, right? And I came home with kind of a sourpuss on my face, and Trish said, why, you know, the long face? I said, because I think the business is forever changed. It used to be $1 million business. Now it's $1 billion business. And every sharpshooter and every shark now is going to be in our business. And they're not going to look at as artists, as music makers. They're going to look at artists as just cash cows. And I said, what I got away with in the 70s, I won't be able to get away with that, you know, in the 80s. And lo and behold, that was true. And wow. But the lesson for me was how to evolve and how to adapt. And if it meant, you know, less profit, but I wanted to do what I wanted to do, then so be it. Or it could mean just adding 1 or 2 elements, or who knows what you know the formula is. But somehow, some way, Michael, I slogged my way through that and kept making records. and
Yeah, and
had hits with Wild Horses.
yeah.
And Black Cars was a very big hit. Hurts to Be in Love was a very big hit worldwide. So I found out that there was a world outside of the United States too, that people were listening to music. And these days, I can go to many, many, many countries and perform, and find that we have an audience. So
Mhm.
again, the bad thing turned into somewhat of a blessing.
Yeah, and that's when we first met in the early '90s.
Yeah,
I started this record label in the Verve Group,
yeah,
and who has now become a friend of mine, Chris Roberts, was running what
yeah,
was called Polygram Classics and Jazz,
yep,
and the Verve Group lived under that. And we started this label, and Polygram gave us a whole bunch of money and office space in New York. And my partner was Lee Rittenauer and Mark
yep,
Wexler,
yep.
and so Chris one day said, "So have you considered any artists that you're looking to sign?" And of course, kind of like I wanted you to be the our opening at Jazz's Nightlife, I said, "Yeah, I want to sign Gino Vannelli." And he just looked at me and smiled, and he said, "I already signed him." and, and talk about taking the air out of my cell. And I said, "Oh," and that's what I think Yonder Tree was the first album you did
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Verve, and
yeah,
but it was great to see you on Verve,
yeah.
and it kind of, the happiness that I got, it was that Gino's back.
Mhm.
And
Michael, I tell you something. When you really have the intention to want to do something that's actually inside of you, and you want to bloom all the way, you bloom towards your destiny. There's something about, we have very, very bad, I think, very, very Philistine or brutal, in a sense, images or explanations of what God is.
Mhm.
But there's a kind of emotion to it all. There's kind of an intention, an emotion, and a feedback, and a loop that's created by an intention. And we live in this. We live in sort of a sea of movement. And what movement you draw to yourself, what ripple you put out, is many times what ripple comes back. Um, so with all those changes happening, whether it be on Verve, or when I got to Verve, I wanted to record a jazz album like Yonder Tree, only with different lyric bent. That's why you have a jazz kind of standard song like Walter Whitman, "Where Are
Mhm.
You?" But who writes about Walter Whitman? Stuff like that. And I wanted to do something, an album again that fused a certain kind of lyric bent with all the jazz standards that I sort of knew and loved. And then same thing with the next album on Verve with Slow Love. And then when I decided that I wanted to fuse some classical music with my pop and contemporary sensibilities, the opportunity came to record Canto. And again, it's sort of a mysterious way how it happens, because I performed for the Pope, and some of the record companies that saw that performance at the Vatican absolutely wanted to sign me doing that kind of music. And everyone said no at first. "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because my father would sing to me in Italian and sometimes French, and he sang a Spanish song for me, and I wanted to sing in those languages. And I wanted to do an orchestral record because I remember the days when the Montreal Symphony just totally blew me away." And I did. I got the opportunity to make on BMG one of my favorite albums that I've ever recorded, called Canto. So when you talk about a career, I think careers are they don't happen just because, well, what am I going to do next? That's not the question.
Mhm.
It's really, how do I satisfy what's still burning inside of me, and how does it come out? Usually, like the adage, you start building it, and roads and pathways start opening up. And it's made me not only a profound and a firm believer in things outside myself, and really in the interior worlds, but I see how it works. It's usually, it's set by your own agenda. It's set by your intention.
Mhm.
And as you probably well know that, being in business and always cutting a path. You guys too have always cut a path. promoting jazz and promoting music and promoting artists that really are sort of on the cutting edge of music is no easy task. You've got to constantly cut the path. There's no one laid out for you. And it is a road less traveled, as Robert Frost, would say. And the greatest thing about it, though, it gives you a firm belief in the interior worlds, that there are currents in the interior world that actually create the outer world. And they're not always reliable because you can't always see them for what they are. Sometimes it's a current you shouldn't be on, but you make your best guess, you make your best assessment. But those currents really do exist. And it's kind of like, in a negative way, I mean, we don't see this virus, right? There's nothing, we can't see it. It exists, though, in a powerful way. And you must guard against it, right? This is why we're doing this like this now. This is why you're in that studio. And so you have to develop the radar within you to observe those inner feelings, those inner worlds, and how they could create things in 2 years to come. And lo and behold, they usually do, Michael.
Yeah. Before we get off the album of Canto, I remember it was about the time when we met, and we were talking a lot on the phone, and you were writing music for your Canto album. And I remember, and I brag about this all the time, that I was talking to Gino Vannelli one day, and he was singing some of the lyrics that he was going to put on this great record that he made. And then a few months later, you sent me the album when you had completed it. And I listened to it. And, I always made fun of, I shouldn't say make fun, but when people cry at operas, I was like, what is that all about? But I listened to Canto, and I literally had tears in my eyes. And I was in my car listening to it. I called you. I got your voicemail. I don't know if you remember this. And I said, Gino, I don't even know what to say. You are a Renaissance man.
Well,
the fact that you could do that album amidst everything else you've done, I thought and it's truly one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, I think probably the best music piece, and there's probably two of them, the Last Days of Summer and De Esperanza. Musically, I think I like those the best. And I did a re-record of Wayward Lover on this last record.
On the new record.
I really like that, how it turned out. I was asking, my wife, I said, well, if you were to, I have 250 songs plus, that I have recorded, have written. If you were to take 5 of my best, because we're talking about George and Ira Gershwin, we're talking about Jerome Kern's best, Irving Berlin's best, Lennon McCartney's best, so on and so forth. I said, well, what would you think the 5 best are, of mine? Well, she said, Last Days of Summer, gotta be. And then she said, gotta be None So Beautiful as the Brave. And her particular favorite is De Esperanza. And I said, why do you like that? And it's really because she said, that not being able to actually decipher the lyrics and filling in all the blanks herself, coupled with the music, puts her in different places. And that's the best an artist could, or a writer could hope for,
Yeah. There's one song, and I wouldn't say it's my favorite Gino Vannelli song, but it's the one that every time I listen to it, I just smile because of the energy. And that is the title track to Brother to Brother. And when you see it live, all the energy that you have on stage, the other musicians on stage, you can just feel it.
You're right. And let me tell you a little, I wanted to be more methodical and a lot more analytical about the lyrics on that record. I wanted to really, really, most of those lyrics on that record were working lyrics. The title, yes, a few lines. And, but I said, okay, now I'm going to sit down and really finish the lyrics. Everybody told me, don't. It feels so right. Don't get too close to it. Stay away from it. Just say it the way it is. I said, but I can't. These lines are repeating, or this is too banal, and da da da. And I remember that there's a similar story when Paul Simon wrote Bridge Over Troubled Water, he said that those were working lyrics, and everybody told him, no, well, you know, keep them. They're really good. So in some ways, you know, Brother to Brother is itself, the song itself is so fun to do live. And the shortcoming of some of the lyrics, the analogies, the the metaphors, actually sometimes works for the song because it makes the song glide so quickly, and it puts so much stress on the motion and the music and the melody, and so your mind is not taking time to actually be too affected by the thematically. So there's something about Brother to Brother that has a little bit of a shortcoming, but the shortcoming actually makes it fly by a little bit more. So that was the last album I ever did that with. All the albums after that, I really sat down after all my rough lyrics. I would sit down and actually say, okay, this is where I'm going to use style and technique and skill to improve this, improve that. And sometimes it takes a long while, you know, because you're dealing with a little jigsaw piece that's not filled in, and you need to find the right piece. This is where the study of some of the great lyricists, Johnny Mercer and so on, I can't tell if anybody who's a aspiring songwriter that's listening to this right now, I can't stress enough to study Cole Porter and Johnny Mercer and Ira Gershwin, the old style writing, because they would not go for near rhymes, they went for perfect rhymes, which is the hardest always. And they would say there would be a million feelings in one short line, and so succinctly put and so on the money. For instance, like night and day, you are the one, only you beneath the moon and under the sun, right? It can't be said better than that with the music. And so when you study that, you study their skills, let it affect your songwriting. You may not use that style totally, but it's something, it's really a rite of passage, you know, to go through.
Wow. So when it comes to Brother to Brother, and then we'll move on from that, you seem to really seek out some pretty killer guitarists.
Oh yeah.
And they have to be killer, for instance, to play that song.
Yep.
And I think they're almost judged against each other. Like Carlos Rios did it like this, but in your current touring band, Jay Coder does it like this. And everyone's saying, which one do I like better?
Well, there was, Mike Miller did it.
Mike Miller, yeah.
Mike played with Chick, for a while. And then Daryl Sturmer played with Dave Collins.
Phil Collins, yeah.
Phil Collins, yeah.
Phil, yeah.
For a while, and they both did a great version of the solo. But yeah, you're right. The guitar solo in Brother to Brother is a rite of passage for a guitarist. And,
so I'll tell you, I don't mean to cut you off. I got to tell you a funny story though. Yeah. All right. So when you were at the grand opening, performed at the grand opening of Jazziz, I get a call from Al Di Meola, and Al said, I'm a huge Gino fan. I'm coming to the show. And I said, of course, come on. And he and I sat at the bar, and when you perform Brother to Brother, Al turned to me, it was loud, and he just kind of whispered in my ear. He said, I haven't heard effing music like this in years. I have chills running down my spine. And of course he saw Jay do that solo. And after the show, he came to see you. We went backstage. And he told Jay, he said, by the way, you're kicking ass. And I could see on Jay's face, it's Al Di Meola telling, this younger guitarist that you nailed it, pal.
Yep.
And there's a photo of you backstage with Al, and my wife and I was very stressed owning a jazz club. I was about 30 pounds heavier then. And that's why we closed it.
Yeah, well, it's a tough nut,
Yeah.
But I mean, look, the place was a great place. We had a blast playing there.
Oh, thanks. Well, so I'll tell one short story because it involves Ross, and that is, so you were booked to perform at the grand opening, and so that became the calendar and the schedule for our opening. your performance that night.
Mhm.
Of course, lo and behold, when you showed up that day for your sound check, we were still under construction.
Yes, I remember that.
And Ross turned to me. That Ross is Gino's brother, and he said, "We're not playing here." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "We're not ready." And I said, "Ross, do you trust me?" I kind of felt like, Aladdin. He said, "Yeah." I said, "We'll be ready by showtime." Now, we were basically putting together furniture and cleaning
Right.
windows and mirrors and doing last minute things. And then you throw me a curveball because you were on stage, and I said, "Gino, is there anything you need? Something that is maybe not right in the room that would make you, feel better?" He goes, "Yeah." You said, "Yeah. See those two columns over there? You really need to put some lights in there. I need some lights on the stage pointing towards me because, that it's kind of dark." And I responded by saying, "Gino, if it means that much to you, I will get it done." And I assumed you were going to say, "Nah, it's okay. Don't worry about it." He said, "It means that much to me." And I literally got our engineers and the lighting people. I said, "I want lights on those poles before the show." And they got it done.
Oh, that's great. I can't remember those details, but lots of those things happen, Michael. With every show, there's every show. There's always some new hurdle, to cross, to get over. We played somewhere, I think in the northern New York state, and our flight was delayed and canceled, and we only got there the day of the show without sleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just in time for sound check. And there's where I tell some of my students, now you can hit, say a B flat. Well, don't sleep and travel all night. See if you can hit it. Then that's when you know that you should pick the right keys for yourself. So there's always something happening,
Absolutely.
before a date or at the date. And hopefully, all I can do is, to tell you the truth, Michael, I have two objectives for the concert. Two most important objectives. And the first objective is that I need to please myself, or else I won't do it. After all these years, it's just too painful to be doing either music I don't like, or in a place I don't like, or with a band I don't like. So if I'm pleased, I know I can actually sing better and give myself and be just all smiles, for the audience. That's one thing. The second of all, I want the audience to enjoy themselves, really enjoy themselves, and not say this, have this feeling of, well, it was a good show, and so on. I want them to be inspired. I want them to feel like, hey, there are people on this stage that are really giving their lives, for music, that are dedicating themselves to the arts, and that the reason why we're dedicating ourselves to the arts, because we are not apes anymore. We have grown. We are human beings, and that's what human beings should do. Think beyond themselves and feel beyond themselves. That's our greatest gift. And so when those two things are accomplished, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah. So speaking of greatest gifts, what greatest gifts do we have coming our way? What I'm sure you're working on 25, 50 songs right now for your next 10 albums. Give us a glimpse of what Gino Vannelli's working on these days and when we can hear it.
Well, I'm going to release I think a mini. We're going to do a mini concert this fall on social media, and maybe it'll be 3 or 4 songs, maybe 5 with the band. That's what I'm planning. The second thing I'm planning is to record 3 or 4 songs, put them out with videos, July, August to record, and maybe put them out this fall sometime. Or for Christmas. I'm producing right now, finishing up a production for a student from Atlanta called Jeff Pike. He's a good singer, and he wanted to record 12 songs of mine. And during this down period of not traveling, not doing concerts, I said, okay, let's do it. And so it's really been a kick to actually rearrange and re-record 12 of my songs dating back to 1975, and to revisit them and modernize them. I'm still working on my a novel, and I'm still working on a libretto. Well, actually, I finished the libretto, but I haven't finished the music to it. Things planned. When I get into my 70s, I really would like to finish the novel and the opera that I've been working on, and I could put aside touring for a little while, and or at least put it aside forever, and finish those things that really are life work, because these two things have been on the table for the last 20 years. But I found that each time I go to one of these things, everything else falls by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
I get so immersed into this novel and so immersed into this opera that everything else seems rather silly to me.
Well, you write well. Actually, I enjoyed reading this.
Oh,
And yeah, and it showed me that you can write words, and that usually comes, in my experience, from someone who reads a lot. You must read a lot.
Yes, I was more inclined to read the humanities, lots of poetry books. I got very interested in ageless wisdom, what some people would call the occult, but it's really not the occult. It's just, the history of religion, of worship, the history of how we think and feel, and when we look up, what do we think? And when someone's at their deathbed, what do they feel? And when Steve Jobs is dying, and he sits up bolt right and goes, wow, wow, what is he wowing? And to an artist, that's very curious, and you want to know, because we plumb the depths all the time. And once in a while, in the last 40 years, I found myself close to that door that that most people stay away from, and I sort of courted it in a sense, with a healthy respect. But what was the question again?
So I guess talking a little bit about religion and spirituality, you studied different religions, and you were born a Catholic, but you seem to know a lot about a lot of religions. And
well, that was not by default, by necessity, because I could no longer believe in the canonical side of Catholicism, or actually religion itself. The rules and the bylaws seemed awfully whimsical. They seem to be at the whim of certain people, whether it be Pope Irenaeus in the 3rd century or 4th century, or Pope Urban, or this guy who said now priests should all be celibate by the 6th century. And so it seemed really, like I say, at a whim. So what was the real truth? What was it originally? What was the original recording? And so in that sense, you have to go back and read all the scriptures, the Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic Gospels. There's 900 pieces, and it takes a lot to get through them all. But it really shades Jesus of Nazareth in a to me, not in a different way, in a much deeper way, in a more way that I think, as a human being, you can let go a little bit of that kind of mysterious faith and say, well, what was it really like? What was he really thinking? And what did he really mean by this? And how close is it to really universal truth? At the same time, where did Gautama, Siddhartha, come from? And why did he do what he did? Well, you come to find out that in the Indus Valley, how the Aryans were actually a tribe that came down from the Indus Valley and basically battled with the native indigenous population of India, and they won, and they set their laws and bylaws and created what we see now as the Hindu religion. And they created a caste system, but their caste system was, you're born of this level, that level, gold, silver, all that kind of stuff. If you're a worker, a merchant, a holy man, rich man, whatever. But the great thing about their system was that you could move into another slot. So create a system of competition or living up to your
Upwardly
own desire.
mobile. Right.
You're living up to your potential. By the time I got to Buddha's age, it was done. You could not move out of your caste. You could not be, if you were an untouchable, you were an untouchable. If you weren't, you weren't. And so that's why a lot of religions come about when there's oppression. And there was oppression happening. And that's why part of this thrust to really come to a better understanding of humanity was because of the oppression. And same thing in the time of Jesus, where the Romans were just basically slaughtering everybody. So the mood of wanting to find a Messiah was there for many, many years in Israel. And it's just that Jesus comes along and says, wait a minute, that's not the way to do it. This is the way to do it. You know, because I am who I am, whatever you want to believe. But the words are that if you go down this road, you'll be just like them and it'll fall apart. But if you go down this road, something will happen. It'll bloom. And he was absolutely right about that. Time proved him right. So to me, the study, the historicity, what the original intention was, then you get a real appreciation of where religion or spirituality or plumbing the depths, where that really comes from. And it comes from very honest and in many cases, souls that were willing to give up their lives. And I've had nothing but incredible curiosity and respect for the whole thing, for the study of 4,000 years, the last 4,000 or 5,000 years. Even like why do certain symbols, geometric symbols, exist on some pottery that's in the four corners of the world? And why are they the same geometric symbols? Where do they come from? And some of the pottery is 5,000, some of it 10,000 years old. That curiosity is, there's universality to us. And so where today, especially in politics, especially in religion, people always try to plumb the differences between us. And I was always trying to understand the similarities, the commonalities that we all share. Because you don't die as a Democrat or Republican or independent. You die as a human being. And if you think you're going to plumb those depths with a partisan attitude, we know that's not right. Something just hits you very wrong about all that. So discovering our humanity, and for me, was through music, has been my lifelong goal.
Well, music in many ways is your message. I noticed following you for all these years.
It is, and someone asked me what inspired me and what inspires me. When I was walking to school one day, it was spring in Montreal, and I came upon a rose garden, and I saw a rose in bloom, in full bloom, with its head pointing towards the sun. It was like May. And I said to myself, I want to be like that rose. I want to bloom fully. And I want to point my head to the light, to the sun, and say, okay, it was not all in vain. You did your job, I did my job, and there's life.
You certainly did, Gino.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we so appreciate you joining us today, and it was great to catch up with you. I hope that our viewers caught a lot of interesting things about Gino Vannelli that you might not have known. And check out the new album. It's Wilderness
Road.
Wilderness Road.
Yes.
And that didn't that come out like maybe a couple months ago?
7 to 8 months ago.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, again, Gino, great to talk to you. Hope we can do this again sometime.
Okay, Michael, take care.
Hey, you be well. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.